What if I told you that some of heavy metal's loudest legends were hooked on something far more dangerous than their own music? Behind the growls, the smoke machines, and the wild guitar solos, many metal icons were caught in a different kind of fire, the one from a cigarette. For some, it was part of their image, that tough rock star look with a smoke in hand. But for others, it became a chain they couldn't break, leading to health battles that nearly silenced their powerful voices for good. Here are 20 heavy metal musicians whose love for cigarettes became their most dangerous addiction. 20. Rob Halford. Before the roaring crowds and leather-clad power, Rob Halford of Judas Priest had another constant companion, his cigarette. In the band's early days, he was often seen taking long drags between recording sessions, letting the smoke swirl like stage fog. It became part of his hard-edged image, blending rebellion with rock stardom. But as the years passed, the toll became clearer. His legendary high notes began to fade, and doctors warned him about his lungs. Realizing that his voice was his weapon, Halford finally put down the cigarettes for good. Yet fans still remember those classic photos of him, mic in one hand, cigarette in the other, a symbol of pure metal attitude. 19. Joey Ramone. Joey Ramone, the towering frontman of the Ramones, may have been punk by label, but his energy and attitude inspired generations of metal bands. Behind his signature glasses and messy hair was a man chained to nicotine. Joey smoked constantly, backstage, on stage, even during interviews. It wasn't just a habit, it was part of his rhythm. The smoke became his comfort through endless tours and chaotic fame. Sadly, years of smoking left his body weaker than it appeared. When illness struck, his voice softened, but his spirit never did. Fans still see Joey as the rebel who never conformed, the man whose smoke-filled aura became a symbol of defiant youth that refused to burn out quietly. 18. Tom Araya. Tom Araya, the fierce voice of Slayer, was known for more than just his growling vocals and heavy bass lines. Offstage, he carried another fire, his love for cigarettes. Fans often caught him lighting up backstage, or even puffing away during sound checks, letting trails of smoke drift like ghostly echoes of his music. For Tom, smoking was part of the calm before the chaos, a quiet ritual before unleashing thunder on stage. As the years went by, the habit clung to him like a shadow, refusing to fade even when health warnings grew louder. Despite it all, Araya's smoking image became as recognizable as his screams, two sides of a man who lived and breathed metal till his core. 17. Phil Anselmo. Phil Anselmo of Pantera lived life on the edge, loud, intense, and unapologetically wild. Cigarettes were his constant companions through it all, tucked between his fingers during interviews or dangling from his lips in backstage chaos. The smoke seemed to fuel his rage and energy, adding grit to his already raw persona. But behind that tough exterior, years of heavy smoking and substance use began to take a toll on his health. His body struggled to keep up with the fire his voice demanded. Though he eventually stepped back to recover, the image of Anselmo exhaling clouds of smoke under flashing stage lights remains etched in rock history, a symbol of rebellion that burned too fast and too bright. 16. Glenn Danzig. Glenn Danzig, the dark prince of heavy metal, carried his cigarette like a weapon, cool, defiant, and perfectly matched to his brooding image. Whether walking into a studio or performing on stage, that thin trail of smoke often followed him, wrapping around his presence like mist. To fans, it wasn't just a habit, it was part of his mystique. Cigarettes gave him that raw, cinematic edge that perfectly fit his shadowy persona. Yet behind that gothic charm was a man caught in a classic addiction, one that quietly consumed the energy he poured into his art. Even today, those iconic photos of Danzig smoke curling around his face, remind fans of a time when danger, darkness, and nicotine ruled metal's throne. 15. James Hetfield. James Hetfield, the powerhouse behind Metallica, didn't just breathe life into metal, he inhaled smoke with it. During the band's early years, he was often spotted with a cigarette hanging from his lips, using nicotine to calm his nerves before electrifying performances. Long studio nights, heavy tours, and the pressure of fame made smoking feel like a necessary escape. But over time, it started to bite back. Hetfield's voice began to show strain, forcing him to choose between his addiction and his art. When he finally quit, his voice regained its strength, yet that smoky edge still lingers in every growl. For many fans, the image of Hetfield, guitar slung low and cigarette in hand, remains the definition of metal rebellion. 14. Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper turned every vice into performance art, and cigarettes were no exception. Known for his theatrical shows filled with blood, horror, and chaos, he often stepped on stage with smoke curling from his fingers like part of the act. Offstage, though, it wasn't just theater, it was habit. Cooper smoked for decades, claiming it kept his nerves steady before performing. The irony wasn't lost on fans. The man who played with fake guillotines and snakes was being quietly killed by something as small as a cigarette. Even after years of trying to quit, the image of Alice Cooper surrounded by smoke became one of rock's most iconic visuals, a blend of danger, addiction, and pure showmanship. 13. Ian Gillan. Ian Gillan's voice could soar through octaves like fire through air, but behind that power was a haze of cigarette smoke. The Deep Purple frontman was famously seen lighting up before recording sessions, claiming it helped him find the mood. His gritty tone and raspy growl became trademarks, but many wondered if cigarettes shaped that sound or damaged it. Even as health warnings grew, Gillan continued to smoke through decades of rock glory. His cigarette, almost as iconic as his microphone, in smoky studios and loud concert halls, he built a sound that defined an era. Whether it was rebellion or ritual, Gillan's relationship with cigarettes added another layer to his legend, a voice forged in smoke and steel. 12. Rob Zombie. Rob Zombie's world has always been a wild blend of horror, chaos, and heavy riffs, and cigarettes fit right into that dark aesthetic. From early band days to solo fame, he was often seen puffing away, the smoke curling around his dreadlocks like part of his eerie persona. Fans came to expect it, the rock star who looked like he walked straight out of a nightmare, cigarette glowing in the shadows. But it wasn't all image. Smoking was his real-life ritual, his moment of calm in a world of noise. Even as others quit, Zombie kept the flame alive, both literally and creatively. His smoke-filled aura became part of the brand, a gothic haze that matched his music's gritty, rebellious soul. 11. Dave Mustaine. Dave Mustaine built his career on aggression, rebellion, and raw energy, and cigarettes fueled much of that journey. During Megadeth's rise, he was rarely seen without a smoke in hand, puffing through interviews and backstage chaos alike. The habit became his silent companion through years of addiction, recovery, and pressure. But after countless health scares and the struggle to maintain his powerful voice, Mustaine decided it was time to quit. The process wasn't easy, yet it marked a turning point in his life. Even after kicking the habit, the image of Mustaine surrounded by smoke still feels legendary, a reminder of the days when his anger, music, and addiction burned at the same intensity. 10. Ronnie James. Ronnie James Dio's voice was a force of nature, powerful, clear, and unforgettable. But behind that perfection was a long history of smoking that few fans knew about. In his younger years, Dio was often seen lighting up between rehearsals, his cigarette glowing as bright as the spotlight he commanded. Despite the habit, His vocals remained untouched for decades, almost superhuman in control and tone. Yet, when illness came knocking later in life, many couldn't help but wonder if the years of smoking had caught up with him. Even so, Dio never lost his fire. The man who gave metal the devil horn's salute sang through it all, proving that no cloud of smoke could ever dim his voice's light. 9. Axl Rose. Axl Rose, the explosive frontman of Guns N' Roses, had a voice that could go from a whisper to a scream in seconds, and cigarettes were often burning right beside him. Whether backstage, in the studio, or strutting under the spotlight, a cigarette was almost part of his outfit. Fans believed that constant smoking helped create his gritty, raspy tone, the very sound that made Sweet Child O' Mine and Welcome to the Jungle unforgettable. But as years passed, that same smoke began to wear down his once dynamic voice. Even with the damage, Axl's presence remained larger than life, a mix of chaos, talent, and rebellion, forever remembered as the singer whose fire burned as fiercely as the cigarettes he couldn't put down. 8. Nikki Sixx. Nikki Sixx, the heart and soul of Motley Crue, faced nearly every addiction imaginable, and cigarettes were one he couldn't shake easily. After beating heroin and alcohol, he admitted that nicotine was one of the hardest demons to fight. Smoking became his comfort during recording sessions and long, chaotic tours. It was his way to steady his nerves, to replace one habit with another. Even after near-death experiences, Sixx often lit another cigarette, chasing calm in the middle of madness. His honesty about addiction inspired millions, yet cigarettes remained his quiet battle. For a man who lived through everything, that little stick of smoke was proof that even survivors carry scars that never fully fade. 7. Slash. When fans picture Slash, they see the top hat, the Les Paul guitar, and that ever-present cigarette dangling from his lips. It wasn't just an accessory, it was part of his legend. Slash smoked through concerts, interviews, and photo shoots, turning nicotine into rock and roll art. His calm, cool energy made the habit look effortless, even iconic. But behind that laid-back image were real consequences. Years of heavy smoking led to heart issues that forced him to change his lifestyle. Even after quitting, the world still remembers the classic image, Slash lost in a solo, surrounded by a haze of smoke, looking every bit the rock god who lived and breathed rebellion with every puff. 6. Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne's life has always been a storm of madness, music, and mayhem, and cigarettes were right there in the middle of it all. From the early Black Sabbath days to his solo tours, Ozzy was rarely seen without a smoke in hand. He'd light up after shows, during interviews, even on the way to rehab. It wasn't just a habit, it was part of his chaotic rhythm. Despite countless health scares, Ozzy often joked about being indestructible, puffing away like nothing could touch him. But behind that wild image was a man fighting real battles, both physical and emotional. Even as the world tried to slow him down, Ozzy's cigarettes burned on like tiny symbols of a rock legend's unstoppable fire. 5. John Lennon. Though often linked to rock more than heavy metal, John Lennon's influence reached deep into the genre's heart, and so did his smoking habit. From recording studios to stage rehearsals, he was rarely without a cigarette between his fingers. For Lennon, smoking was both comfort and disguise, a moment of calm in a world that constantly demanded his voice. The haze of cigarette smoke seemed to follow him everywhere, blending with the introspective mood of his music. It was as if he used nicotine to escape the noise of fame, even for a minute. His addiction was quiet, but constant. Another part of a complex artist who gave his all to music, even as smoke slowly filled his world. 4. Kurt Cobain. For Kurt Cobain, cigarettes weren't just a habit. They were a way to survive the chaos inside his mind. From his early days in Nirvana to the final years of fame, he was constantly seen lighting up. Smoking became his escape, a small comfort when fame felt suffocating. It was rare to find a photo or interview where he didn't have one in hand. His voice, raw and emotional, seemed to carry the exhaustion of every puff. While his music defined a generation, the cigarettes symbolized the darkness he could never escape. They were his quiet rebellion, his coping mechanism, and a shadow that followed him until the end. 3. Zakk Wylde. Zakk Wylde, the fierce guitarist known for his explosive solos and raw energy, once had a cigarette glued to his hand. Whether shredding on stage or jamming in the studio, he smoked endlessly. It was his way of relaxing between the madness of tours and performances. But years of chain smoking caught up when he developed blood clots that nearly took his life. That terrifying experience finally pushed him to quit. He replaced the cigarettes with endless cups of coffee, proving that his fire didn't need nicotine to burn bright. Even without the smoke, Zakk's intensity never faded. He showed that real strength isn't in the cigarette, it's in the will to survive and keep playing. 2. Tony Iommi. Tony Iommi, the legendary guitarist who shaped heavy metal's sound, carried another legacy, the smoke that surrounded him for decades. Ever since his teenage years, cigarettes were part of his daily routine, a comfort he never gave up, even after losing parts of his fingers in an accident. During long recording nights with Black Sabbath, he smoked constantly, using it to focus and unwind. But years later, cancer came knocking, forcing him to face the habit that had once been his companion. Despite it all, Tony's creativity never dimmed. The riffs he created, often through clouds of smoke, became immortal. Proof that even through addiction and illness, true art refuses to fade. 1. Lemmy Kilmister. If heavy metal ever had a face, it was Lemmy Kilmister's, gritty, fearless, and forever wreathed in smoke. His love for cigarettes was no secret. It was practically his signature. Fans remember him hunched over his bass at a bar, cigarette glowing beside a bottle of Jack Daniels. Lemmy didn't care about image. He lived exactly as he wanted, and that included smoking until his final days. Doctors warned him, fans worried, but Lemmy brushed it all off with a grin and another drag. When he passed, it felt like the last puff of an era. To this day, every curl of cigarette smoke in a dim rock bar feels like a small salute to the man who made it look legendary. It's wild to think that something as small as a cigarette could take down some of metal's biggest names, isn't it? Behind the thunder of guitars and screaming crowds, many of these artists were fighting private battles that fame could never fix. Their music might have been loud, but their struggles often went unheard. So the next time you crank up one of their tracks, remember the price they paid to live that rock star life. Which of these stories shocked you the most? And did any of your favorite metal icons make the list? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more untold stories from the world of heavy metal. What if I told you that some of heavy metal's loudest legends weren't destroyed by fame or drugs, but by the bottle itself? Behind the screaming guitars and thunderous drums were artists drowning in pain, using alcohol as both fuel and escape. They lived fast, partied harder, and thought the music would outlast the damage. But for many, the hangover never ended. Some fell from grace, others lost everything, including their lives, to addiction that spiraled out of control. These are the 30 heavy metal stars whose greatest battle wasn't on stage, but inside themselves. 30. Vince Neil. Vince Neil was the ultimate rock party animal. Wild nights, endless tours, and a bottle always within reach. But behind the neon lights and screaming fans, alcohol pulled him into a spiral of pain. The tragic crash that took a friend's life marked a turning point. Yet the drinking never stopped haunting him. Fame gave him everything, but the bottle took away the peace he could never find again. 29. James Hetfield. James Hetfield looked unstoppable, a metal god roaring into stadiums filled with fire and thunder. But offstage, he fought a quiet war with alcohol that nearly broke Metallica apart. The anger, the control, the perfection, all numbed by one more drink. It took rehab and raw honesty to bring him back, but the scars left behind remind everyone that even legends can almost lose it all to the bottle. 28. Dave Mustaine. Dave Mustaine's fire built Megadeth, raw, furious, and unstoppable. But that same fire burned from inside every time he turned to the bottle. His anger, his pain, his obsession with success, all mixed with alcohol until it nearly destroyed his music, his health, and his mind. From being kicked out of Metallica to battling his own demons, the bottle stayed by his side like a curse he couldn't shake. 27. Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne lived like there were no rules, because for him there weren't. The Prince of Darkness built his legend on chaos, booze, and blurred nights that lasted for decades. His drinking pushed him past sanity, tearing through families, tours, and friendships. Every sip was another step toward destruction. Even survival felt like a miracle, but the years of alcohol left marks that even rock's wildest survivor couldn't fully escape. 26. Tom Araya. Tom Araya, the fierce frontman of Slayer, wasn't just battling on stage. He was fighting within. Known for his thunderous screams and raw energy, he lived the hard-partying life that came with fame. But behind the chaos, alcohol started to take its toll, affecting his health and his faith. As years went on, he chose a quieter path, trading bottles for balance. The wild, unstoppable energy faded, leaving behind a man who had seen both the highs and the heartbreak of metal life. 25. Phil Anselmo. Phil Anselmo's voice could shake the earth, but his demons spoke louder. Years of alcohol and anger turned him into his own worst enemy, poisoning friendships and performances alike. What started as a wild celebration became bitter self-destruction. His energy on stage was unmatched, but off it, the bottle drained his fire. Every drink pushed him further from the man fans once saw as unstoppable, leaving only chaos in its wake. 24. Scott Weiland. Scott Weiland had the look, the voice, the swagger, everything a frontman needed. But alcohol became both his comfort and his curse. The more he drank, the further he drifted from reality, destroying bands, trust, and his own health. The bottle blurred his brilliance, turning one of rock's most magnetic figures into a tragic reminder of how fame and addiction can collide, leaving only echoes of what once was. 23. Nikki Sixx. Nikki Sixx didn't just live the rock lifestyle. He embodied it. Booze and chaos ran through his veins like a second bloodstream. He overdosed, died, and came back. But even after that brush with death, the battle wasn't over. Alcohol had been his armor and his curse, numbing pain while destroying everything that mattered. He survived, but the bottle nearly turned his story into another tragic headline of excess. 22. Dimebag Darrell. Dimebag Darrell was pure joy on stage, all riffs, laughter, and shots of whiskey. His charm made him unforgettable, but his drinking was constant, almost part of his identity. Behind the jokes and toasts was a man running on fumes, fueled by alcohol and adrenaline. When tragedy struck, fans mourned a hero gone too soon, but his story also revealed the heavy cost of living every day like the last. 21. Slash was the face of cool. Top hat, cigarette, guitar solos that melted hearts. But behind those iconic riffs, Alcohol was slowly burning him out. He drank to calm his nerves, to quiet the noise, until it nearly killed him. Doctors warned him he had weeks to live, yet somehow he survived. Still, the bottle had already stolen years from his prime, leaving behind a man who outplayed death itself. 20. Duff McKagan. Duff McKagan was the engine of Guns N' Roses, keeping rhythm while living dangerously fast. But alcohol didn't just slow him down, it almost stopped him completely. His pancreas literally exploded from years of abuse, forcing him to face the brutal truth. That near-death moment changed everything, but the scars remained. The man who once partied harder than anyone learned the hardest way what the bottle can truly destroy. 19. Jason Newsted. Jason Newsted joined Metallica during their most chaotic years, fame exploding, tempers flaring, and bottles always within reach. Trying to fit in meant drinking hard, living fast, and drowning stress in alcohol. But behind his calm smile, he was exhausted and empty. The band's non-stop chaos and heavy drinking culture eventually pushed him to walk away. His body survived the lifestyle, but the bottle left deep cracks in his spirit. 18. Axl Rose. Axl Rose was fire personified, unpredictable, raw, and loud enough to fill stadiums. But that same fire burned hotter with every drink. Alcohol fueled his rage, magnified his ego, and tore apart everything he built. The outbursts, the cancellations, the chaos, all fed by a bottle that never seemed to leave his hand. His voice could command the world, but the drink almost silenced everything that made him unstoppable. 17. Corey Taylor. Behind Corey Taylor's mask was a man running from his pain. Alcohol became his shield, a way to forget trauma, loss, and pressure. On stage, he looked invincible, but off stage, he was crumbling. The bottle gave him courage at first, then took control completely. When he finally put it down, it wasn't victory, it was survival. The scars it left behind still echo through every scream and lyric he sings. 16. Zakk Wylde. Zakk Wylde's guitar roared louder than life, and so did his drinking. Whiskey was his trademark. Fans even idolized it. But one day, his body shut down, literally rejecting alcohol. Blood clots nearly killed him, forcing him to face a truth he'd ignored for decades. He quit cold, yet the years of abuse left lasting damage. The man who once joked about his drinking learned that the bottle always wins in the end. 15. Layne Staley. Layne Staley's haunting voice carried pain like few others could. Behind those lyrics was a man drowning, not just in grief, but in alcohol. What began as a celebration became self-destruction. The more he drank, the darker his world became until the spotlight faded completely. His voice still echoes through generations, but the bottle helped silence one of rock's most emotional and tortured souls long before his time. 14. Chris Cornell. Chris Cornell had everything: talent, fame, family. But inside, he was battling storms no one could see. Alcohol was his escape, the temporary peace that always turned back into pain. He tried to outrun his past through music, yet the bottle kept pulling him down. Even when he seemed free, the old ghosts never truly left. His death left fans heartbroken, but the signs of struggle had been there all along. 13. Ian Scott. Ian was loud, proud, and unapologetically metal. For years, the bottle was part of his image. Hard-living, fast-talking, unstoppable. But alcohol slowly drained the fire that made him fearless. Late nights turned into lost days, and the fun became exhaustion. Walking away from drinking saved his career and his sanity, but it came after years of self-destruction. The man who once laughed at danger nearly became another casualty of the lifestyle. 12. Dave Brockie. Dave Brockie lived every show like it was the end of the world, wild costumes, insane energy, and rivers of booze. For him, alcohol wasn't just fun, it was part of the act. But when the stage lights went out, the bottle stayed. The party became routine, then poison. His humor hid deep exhaustion, and by the time his health collapsed, the damage was already done. Another brilliant performer lost too soon. 11. Cliff Burton. Cliff Burton was the heart of early Metallica. Grounded, calm, yet surrounded by chaos. The band's world revolved around hard drinking, endless touring, and constant mayhem. Though not the wildest in the group, even he couldn't fully escape the heavy lifestyle that followed them everywhere. His death in that tragic crash cut short a life that might have changed metal forever, leaving fans to wonder how long anyone could have survived in that world. 10. Paul Di'Anno. No, before Bruce Dickinson took over, Paul Di'Anno was Iron Maiden's raw, rebellious frontman. But his drinking spiraled out of control right as fame came knocking. Alcohol made him unpredictable and unreliable, pushing the band to let him go. What could have been a legendary career ended in chaos and regret. The voice that helped launch one of metal's biggest names was silenced by the same bottle that fueled his early fire. 9. Ronnie James Dio. Ronnie James Dio sang about fighting demons, yet his greatest battles were within. Behind that mighty voice and powerful presence, he carried years of quiet drinking that chipped away at his health. Though he tried to keep control, alcohol shadowed much of his life on the road. His passing left a hole in metal history, but his struggle showed that even the strongest warriors can be slowly undone by the bottle. 8. Sebastian Bach. Sebastian Bach lived loud, laughed harder, and partied like every night was his last. Alcohol gave him confidence and chaos in equal measure. His outbursts, broken relationships, and band feuds were often fueled by heavy drinking. The wild charm that made him a star also burned bridges faster than fame could rebuild them. He eventually sobered up, but not before the bottle nearly buried everything that once made him shine. 7. Pete Way. Pete Way was the ultimate rock and roll rebel, wild, fearless, and permanently half-drunk. He inspired generations of musicians, but his drinking turned every comeback into another collapse. Decades of alcohol abuse shattered his health and career, leaving him fighting for his life more than once. By the time the music world realized how much he'd given, the bottle had already taken nearly everything from him except his name. 6. Bon Scott. Bon Scott lived like his songs, fast, reckless, and unforgettable. Every show was a party, every night another drink. His energy made AC/DC unstoppable, but his body couldn't keep up with his lifestyle. One night of heavy drinking ended it all, leaving the world stunned. His death was a brutal reminder that even the loudest voices in rock can go silent when the bottle finally wins the fight. 5. Randy Rhoads. Randy Rhoads wasn't a heavy drinker himself, but he was surrounded by a world drowning in alcohol. The chaos, the fights, the constant partying, all shaped the reckless environment that led to tragedy. His death wasn't caused by drinking, but it stemmed from a culture built on it. In a way, the bottle destroyed more than lives. It destroyed potential, cutting short one of metal's brightest young talents. 4. Keith Moon. Keith Moon lived like a hurricane, loud, wild, and unstoppable. Alcohol fueled his antics, his humor, and his madness. But as the years went on, the same drink that made him fearless also made him fragile. His liver failed under the weight of endless bottles, and his body couldn't keep up with his legend. By the time the music stopped, the party had already claimed one of rock's greatest drummers. 3. Lemmy Kilmister. Lemmy was built on whiskey, rebellion, and pure rock energy. Fans believed he was indestructible, and for decades he almost was. But a lifetime of drinking caught up with him in silence. Even he admitted his body couldn't take it anymore. When he passed, it felt like metal itself lost a piece of its soul. The man who outdrank everyone proved that not even legends can outrun the bottle forever. 2. Eddie Van Halen. Eddie Van Halen changed the sound of the guitar forever, but his genius came with demons. Alcohol followed him everywhere, numbing pain and feeding chaos. His creativity burned bright, but his health crumbled behind the scenes. Even as he fought to recover, years of heavy drinking had already done their damage. His story became a heartbreaking truth. The same passion that made him a legend also destroyed him inside. 1. Chuck Schuldiner. Chuck Schuldiner was the father of death metal, a visionary who shaped an entire genre. Yet behind his brilliance was a life surrounded by the metal world's dark temptations. Alcohol wasn't his main weapon, but it surrounded him, haunting his circle and influencing his downfall. His final years were marked by pain and struggle, both physical and emotional. When he passed, the genre lost its pioneer, another soul touched by the bottle's shadow. Their music shook the world, their voices defined a generation. But in the end, the same fire that made them legends burned them from the inside out. Fame couldn't save them, and neither could the fans who worshipped every note. It's a haunting reminder that behind every anthem of rebellion lies a human story of struggle and pain. Which of these fallen metal icons hit you the hardest? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories of rock and metal's most unforgettable stars. What if I told you that behind the screaming guitars and thunderous drums, some of heavy metal's biggest names were also the biggest jerks? They weren't just loud on stage, they were reckless, arrogant, and sometimes downright cruel off it. From brutal backstage fights to shocking betrayals, these rock icons left chaos everywhere they went. Fans saw legends, but those who knew them up close often saw egos spiraling out of control. Here are 12 of the worst jerks in heavy metal history. 12. Lars Ulrich, Metallica. Lars Ulrich is no doubt one of the most important names in heavy metal history. As Metallica's drummer, he helped shape the sound of thrash and built one of the biggest bands the genre has ever seen. But behind the success, Lars has also built a reputation as one of the most arrogant and difficult personalities in metal. He is remembered for being controlling in the studio, often clashing with bandmates over creative direction. His feud with Jason Newsted during the Street Anger sessions is just one of many examples of his dominating behavior. What really sealed his jerk reputation, though, was the infamous Napster battle in the early 2000s. Lars became the face of Metallica's war against music piracy, suing fans and taking a hard stance that made him look greedy and out of touch. Instead of sympathy, he faced backlash from millions of people who once idolized the band. Even today, many fans bring up his cocky attitude in interviews and his history of putting his ego before the music. His drumming may have carried Metallica into the history books, but his attitude locked him onto this list of heavy metal's worst jerks. 11. Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent is another figure whose personality has overshadowed his music. Known as the Motor City Madman, Nugent built a career on wild stage energy and sharp guitar playing, but he has also spent decades cultivating a reputation as one of rock's loudest and most obnoxious voices. Unlike many of his peers, Nugent thrives on stirring outrage. His interviews and public appearances often include offensive remarks aimed at women, minorities, or politicians, earning him criticism across the board. Beyond his music, he has also been heavily involved in political debates, pushing extreme opinions that many find distasteful. Fans who once admired his skills now often see him as a professional provocateur rather than a serious musician. Stories of his reckless behavior offstage only add to the image of a man who thrives on shock value more than artistry. Over the years, his constant need for attention, combined with his unwillingness to back down from controversy, has made him one of the most polarizing figures in heavy metal history. His guitar chops gave him fame, but his ego and mouth guaranteed his spot on any list of the genre's worst jerks. 10. Phil Anselmo, Pantera. Phil Anselmo, the frontman of Pantera, was once hailed as one of the most powerful and commanding voices in heavy metal. On stage, his presence was unmatched, driving Pantera to the top during the 90s, with albums that redefined the sound of groove metal. But offstage, Anselmo often revealed a darker side. His temper, reckless lifestyle, and offensive behavior created countless controversies. He was notorious for clashing with his own bandmates, sometimes threatening the very future of Pantera. Years of substance abuse fueled many of his violent outbursts, leading to unpredictable performances that frustrated fans. What made things worse were his rants, some filled with shocking and offensive remarks that stained his reputation. Even after Pantera's breakup, Anselmo carried this reputation of being volatile and unapologetic. While his talent as a frontman cannot be denied, his inability to control his temper and his history of offensive behavior have permanently tied his name to heavy metal's darker side. His voice gave Pantera an edge, but his actions secured him a place among the worst jerks in the genre. 9. Varg Vikernes, Burzum. Few names in heavy metal history are as notorious as Varg Vikernes. Known for his one-man project Burzum, Vikernes became infamous not just for his music, but for his shocking crimes and extremist views. In the early 90s, he was at the center of Norway's black metal scene. But instead of fame for his music alone, Varg made headlines for burning churches and committing violent acts that horrified the world. The most shocking event was the murder of fellow musician Euronymous, a crime that sent him to prison and turned him into one of the most infamous figures in music history. Beyond his criminal record, Vikernes has continued to embrace extremist ideologies and spread hateful rhetoric, which has kept his reputation tarnished long after his release. Fans of black metal may debate his influence musically, but few defend his actions outside of the art. His crimes, arrogance, and unrepentant attitude cement him not just as a controversial figure, but as one of the biggest jerks the heavy metal world has ever seen. In a genre filled with wild personalities, Varg Vikernes stands out for all the wrong reasons. 8. Dave Mustaine, Megadeth. Dave Mustaine's story is legendary in heavy metal and not always for the right reasons. After being kicked out of Metallica in the early 80s for his drinking, temper, and reckless behavior, Mustaine set out to prove himself. He went on to form Megadeth, a band that would become one of the big four of thrash metal. His talent as a guitarist and songwriter is undeniable, but his personality has often made him one of the most difficult figures in the genre. Mustaine is known for holding grudges, with his feud against Metallica lasting for decades and fueling countless bitter interviews. Bandmates have often described him as hard to work with, thanks to his need for control and his unpredictable temper. His sharp tongue and arrogance have created rifts in the industry, and many see him as someone who can't let go of past rivalries. Even though he eventually reconciled with Metallica in later years, the bitterness that defined much of his career helped solidify his reputation. His genius gave us unforgettable riffs, but his relentless ego and inability to forgive have made him one of heavy metal's worst jerks. 7. Gene Simmons, Kiss. Gene Simmons is a name that screams ego in the world of rock and heavy metal. As the bassist and co-founder of Kiss, Simmons turned face paint and fire-breathing performances into a global phenomenon. Yet, while his business sense helped Kiss become one of the most recognizable bands in history, it also exposed a side of him that fans and critics alike call greedy and arrogant. Simmons has never shied away from boasting about his success, wealth, and conquests, often overshadowing his actual musical contributions. He has made countless controversial comments over the years, ranging from offensive remarks about women to dismissive comments about other artists. Many accuse him of caring more about money than music, pointing to the endless merchandise lines Kiss has slapped their logo on, from coffins to condoms. While Simmons sees himself as a master businessman, others see him as a prime example of self-importance gone too far. His constant need to provoke, paired with his shameless bragging, keeps his name high on the list of heavy metal's most disliked personalities. Gene Simmons may have built an empire, but his overblown ego makes him one of the genre's worst jerks. 6. Yngwie Malmsteen. Yngwie Malmsteen is often praised as one of the most technically gifted guitarists in heavy metal, but along with his blistering speed came a reputation for arrogance that followed him everywhere. From the moment he arrived on the scene in the early 80s, Malmsteen carried himself like he was above everyone else. Stories from fellow musicians and crew members paint him as a diva with an explosive temper. The most infamous example is the "You Have Unleashed the Fury" airplane meltdown, where he lashed out at passengers in a drunken rage. This single moment captured the larger-than-life ego that Malmsteen became known for. His obsession with perfection and his tendency to belittle others often overshadowed his undeniable skill. Over the years, his demanding personality caused rifts with bandmates, managers, and even fans who found his attitude unbearable. While his guitar playing left a mark on heavy metal history, his reputation for being condescending and difficult to deal with has never gone away. Instead of being remembered only for his talent, Malmsteen is often brought up as a warning of how unchecked ego can turn a genius into one of heavy metal's worst jerks. 5. Axl Rose. Guns N' Roses. Axl Rose is one of the most iconic frontmen in rock and heavy metal, but he's also one of the most infamous for bad behavior. During Guns N' Roses' peak in the late 80s and early 90s, Axl's voice and stage presence made him a legend, yet his constant lateness, volatile personality, and reckless decisions often turned concerts into disasters. Countless shows began hours late because Rose refused to perform until he was ready, testing fans' patience to the breaking point. In some cases, his temper boiled over into chaos, like the infamous 1991 Street Louis concert riot, which erupted after Rose abruptly left the stage. Beyond live shows, he often clashed with his own bandmates, causing rifts that eventually tore Guns N' Roses apart at their height. His ego and need for control left a trail of broken relationships and disappointed fans. While Axl's music earned him a place in rock history, his unpredictable behavior and disregard for the people who supported him secured his place as one of heavy metal's worst jerks. His talent made him unforgettable, but his arrogance made him notorious. 4. Glenn Danzig. Glenn Danzig carved out his place in heavy metal with his dark voice and commanding presence, first with the Misfits and later with his own band, Danzig. While his music gained a loyal following, his personality often pushed people away. Known for having one of the shortest tempers in the business, Danzig's arrogance has been the subject of endless stories. Fans and fellow musicians alike have described him as dismissive, confrontational, and difficult to deal with. His tough guy image has at times slipped into real-life hostility, leading to backstage fights and public meltdowns. The most famous example came when a backstage video of him being knocked out with a single punch went viral, tarnishing his intimidating persona. Instead of laughing it off or showing humility, Danzig doubled down on his anger, proving that his ego often outweighed his common sense. While his contributions to heavy metal's darker, gothic style are undeniable, his reputation for being self-absorbed and combative keeps him labeled as one of the genre's worst jerks. His music still resonates with fans, but his attitude made sure he'll always be remembered as much for his arrogance as for his art. 3. Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Manson became one of the most controversial figures in heavy metal with his shocking stage presence and theatrical performances. At his peak in the 90s, he was seen as the ultimate rebel, pushing boundaries with outrageous costumes, blasphemous lyrics, and jaw-dropping live shows. But behind the makeup and spectacle, Manson developed a reputation for behavior that went far beyond shock rock. He was notorious for mistreating fans, humiliating bandmates, and creating a toxic environment around him. Stories of destructive antics backstage and on tour painted him as someone who thrived on chaos at the expense of others. Over time, accusations of abusive behavior and disturbing personal conduct began to dominate the conversation about him. What started as a carefully crafted controversy to build his career turned into a reflection of a deeply troubling personality. For many fans, the line between performance and real-life cruelty blurred, leaving his reputation permanently damaged. While his influence on metal's theatrical side is undeniable, Marilyn Manson's ego, cruelty, and disturbing actions have made him one of the most despised figures in the genre, solidifying his place on any list of heavy metal's worst jerks. 2. Tommy Lee, Motley Crue. Tommy Lee is often remembered as the wild drummer of Motley Crue, a band built on chaos, excess, and controversy. While his drumming fueled some of the biggest anthems of the 80s, his offstage behavior painted him as one of heavy metal's most notorious jerks. Known for his non-stop partying, reckless stunts, and infamous feuds, Lee often brought drama wherever he went. His turbulent marriage to Pamela Anderson played out in the public eye, complete with scandals that overshadowed his music. On tour, Lee became a symbol of rock star arrogance, indulging in fights, public meltdowns, and outrageous antics that frequently landed him in trouble. Even with his charisma, many saw him as someone who cared more about fame and spectacle than his craft. Bandmates and fans alike grew frustrated with his unpredictable personality and need for attention. While his wild lifestyle helped build the bad boy image that Motley Crue thrived on, it also locked him into a reputation as one of heavy metal's biggest jerks. His drumming gave the band power, but his ego and scandals kept his name in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. 1. Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne is called the Prince of Darkness for a reason, and it isn't just because of his music. As the frontman of Black Sabbath, and later a solo star, Ozzy became one of the most famous figures in heavy metal history. But his career is also packed with outrageous stunts, drug-fueled chaos, and jaw-dropping moments that made even his fans shake their heads. From biting the head off a bat on stage, to trashing hotel rooms and causing havoc on tour, Ozzy seemed to thrive on being unpredictable. His substance abuse only fueled the madness, often leaving those around him to clean up the mess. Bandmates grew frustrated with his unreliability, and stories of his reckless behavior became just as famous as his music. Even in his personal life, his temper and addictions created turmoil. While many fans see him as a lovable madman today, during his peak years, he was often seen as a nightmare to work with and a danger to himself and others. Ozzy's legacy as a metal icon is unquestionable, but his shocking antics and uncontrollable behavior make him the ultimate example of a heavy metal jerk. And there you have it, 12 of the worst jerks in heavy metal history. From ego-driven meltdowns to outrageous scandals, these stars proved that sometimes the chaos offstage can be louder than the music itself. But here's the real question. Do their bad attitudes ruin their legacy, or does the music still outweigh the madness? If you loved this wild ride through metal's darker side, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe for more shocking stories, and ring the bell so you never miss a countdown. Which heavy metal jerk do you think deserves the #1 spot? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's hear your take. What if I told you that some of heavy metal's loudest legends were hiding a deadly weakness? On stage, they looked larger than life, screaming into microphones, smashing guitars, and living like untouchable gods. But behind the chaos, their wild habits came with a price too heavy to escape. Drugs didn't just fuel their music, they stole their health, destroyed their friendships, and, for some, ended their lives far too soon. Here are 10 heavy metal stars who were destroyed by drugs. 10. Ozzy Osbourne. The Prince of Darkness himself became a cautionary tale of rock excess that spanned 4 decades of self-destruction. Ozzy's relationship with substances began in the early Black Sabbath days and spiraled into legendary proportions of consumption. He would drink entire bottles of cognac daily, snort lines of ants for shock value, and perform outrageous stunts like urinating on the Alamo while wearing his wife's dress. His alcohol tolerance became superhuman, consuming amounts that would kill ordinary people while continuing to perform. Multiple near-death experiences punctuated his career, including a terrifying 1,989 incident where he strangled Sharon while blackout drunk, nearly killing her before snapping back to consciousness. His liver was so damaged that doctors said it resembled that of a severe cirrhosis patient, yet he continued drinking. The combination of alcohol, cocaine, and prescription pills turned him into an unpredictable force of chaos, capable of anything from brilliant performances to destructive rampages. Despite multiple expensive stints in rehab throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Ozzy continued his destructive patterns for years. Eventually, family intervention and serious health scares forced him towards sobriety, though the neurological damage was already irreversible, leaving him with permanent tremors and speech difficulties. 9. Nikki Sixx. Nikki Sixx's heroin addiction reached mythical proportions during Mötley Crüe's heyday, culminating in one of rock's most infamous overdose stories that should have been his final chapter. On December 23, 1987, Sixx injected a lethal combination of heroin and cocaine that stopped his heart completely, turning his lips blue and shutting down his entire system. Paramedics declared him legally dead for a full 2 minutes before reviving him with adrenaline shots directly to his heart, literally bringing him back from the other side. Instead of serving as the ultimate wake-up call, Sixx returned home and immediately shot up again, proving the complete control addiction held over his rational mind. His drug use began as a way to escape childhood trauma and poverty, but heroin became his undisputed master, controlling every aspect of his existence. The bassist would spend thousands of dollars daily on drugs, often disappearing for days in crack houses and shooting galleries, living in conditions that defied belief. His addiction destroyed relationships, nearly killed bandmates through secondhand exposure to his lifestyle, and turned recording sessions into drug-fueled disasters where more time was spent getting high than making music. Sixx's candid autobiography, The Heroin Diaries, revealed the full extent of his descent into hell and his eventual path to recovery. 8. Lane Staley. Lane Staley possessed one of metal's most haunting and powerful voices, but heroin addiction transformed him from a charismatic frontman into a reclusive ghost who haunted his own life. His descent began during Alice in Chains' meteoric rise to fame in the early 1990s, initially using drugs to cope with the overwhelming pressures of sudden stardom and deep personal demons that had plagued him since childhood. Heroin became his constant companion and closest relationship, more important than family, friends, or music itself. As his dependency deepened, Staley withdrew from public life almost entirely, rarely leaving his Seattle apartment for the final years of his existence, becoming a prisoner in his own home. Bandmates and friends watched helplessly as he deteriorated physically and mentally, his once robust frame shrinking to skeletal proportions. His teeth fell out from drug use, his weight plummeted to dangerous levels, and his once powerful voice became a shadow of its former glory. Multiple intervention attempts failed as Staley refused all treatment offers, convinced that recovery was impossible. He was found dead in his apartment on April 19, 2002, having been deceased for 2 weeks before discovery. The combination of heroin and cocaine that killed him represented the tragic end of one of grunge's most gifted and tortured vocalists. 7. Dave Mustaine. Dave Mustaine's addiction story is intertwined with his legendary rage and perfectionism, creating a volatile combination that nearly destroyed his career multiple times and turned him into metal's most unpredictable figure. After being kicked out of Metallica partially due to his excessive drinking and violent behavior, Mustaine channeled his anger into forming Megadeth while simultaneously diving deeper into substance abuse as a way to numb the rejection. His consumption was absolutely staggering, a full fifth of vodka daily, combined with massive amounts of cocaine, heroin, and prescription painkillers that kept him in a constant state of intoxication. The drugs fueled his existing paranoia and violent tendencies, leading to multiple band breakups as talented musicians couldn't handle his increasingly erratic and threatening behavior. Studio sessions became absolute nightmares of missed deadlines, explosive confrontations, and creative paralysis caused by his impaired state. Mustaine's addiction reached its peak when he began hallucinating that people were trying to kill him, leading to dangerous situations where he would threaten band members and producers. In 2002, a severe nerve injury in his arm threatened to end his guitar playing permanently, serving as a brutal wake-up call about his mortality. Multiple expensive rehab attempts failed before Mustaine finally achieved sobriety through a combination of intensive treatment and finding Christianity, allowing Megadeth to reunite and continue creating music. 6. Scott Weiland. Scott Weiland's battle with addiction became as famous as his distinctive voice, ultimately overshadowing his considerable talents as a vocalist and performer, turning him into a tragic figure of wasted potential. His heroin and cocaine use began during Stone Temple Pilots' commercial peak in the mid-1990s, initially hidden from bandmates and fans who had no idea their charismatic frontman was slowly destroying himself. The addiction quickly consumed his entire existence, leading to increasingly erratic stage performances, missed concerts that disappointed thousands of fans, and multiple arrests that made international headlines. Weiland's drug use was compulsive and self-destructive in the extreme. He would disappear for days without contact, spend entire band advances on drugs before anyone could stop him, and lie constantly about his sobriety status to everyone who cared about him. Multiple expensive stints in luxury rehab facilities provided only temporary relief, as he would relapse often within weeks of treatment completion, sometimes using again before even leaving the facility. His addiction destroyed his marriage to model Janina Castaneda and severely strained his relationships with his children, who watched their father waste away. The formation of supergroup Velvet Revolver offered hope for a fresh start, but Weiland's continued drug use led to his dismissal from that project as well. Despite brief periods of sobriety and creative resurgence, his addiction ultimately proved fatal when he overdosed on cocaine and alcohol in December 2015 while on tour. 5. Phil Anselmo. Phil Anselmo's heroin addiction nearly ended his life during Pantera's commercial peak, transforming the aggressive frontman into a shadow of his former self and threatening to destroy one of metal's most important bands. His drug use began innocently as a way to cope with chronic back pain from years of intense stage performances and the brutal physical demands of fronting such an aggressive band. However, prescription painkillers quickly led to street heroin, which provided more effective relief but came with devastating consequences. The addiction severely affected his legendary vocal performances, causing him to nod off on stage during shows and deliver inconsistent performances that frustrated longtime bandmates and devoted fans. In 1996, during a Dallas concert, Anselmo overdosed on heroin and literally flatlined for 4 terrifying minutes before being revived by paramedics who worked frantically to save his life. The near-death experience should have served as the ultimate wake-up call, but Anselmo continued using despite the obvious dangers. His addiction contributed to increasing tensions within Pantera as bandmates grew tired of dealing with his unreliable behavior, missed rehearsals, and drug-induced mood swings that made working together nearly impossible. The heroin use also fueled his existing paranoia and aggression, leading to conflicts that would eventually contribute to Pantera's bitter breakup. Anselmo eventually overcame his addiction through multiple treatment attempts and sheer personal determination, allowing him to continue his musical career with various successful projects. 4. Randy Rhoads. Randy Rhoads' tragic death wasn't directly caused by drugs, but he was completely immersed in the chaotic, substance-fueled world of Ozzy's touring organization, where reckless excess was normalized, encouraged, and practically required for survival. The young guitarist, only 25 when he died, was surrounded by constant drug and alcohol abuse that defined the early 1980s metal scene and created an environment where dangerous behavior was not only accepted but celebrated. While Rhoads himself was relatively clean compared to his heavily intoxicated bandmates, the atmosphere of reckless behavior and consistently poor decision-making ultimately contributed to his untimely demise. The tour bus environment was filled with cocaine, alcohol, and increasingly dangerous stunts that pushed all boundaries of safety and sanity in pursuit of the next thrill. Rhoads' death came when the band's bus driver, high on cocaine and lacking sleep, convinced a small aircraft pilot to take him and Rhoads on a joyride that violated every safety protocol. The aircraft clipped the tour bus while attempting a dangerous low pass meant to buzz the sleeping band members, crashing immediately and killing everyone aboard instantly. The tragic incident highlighted how the drug-fueled culture of rock tours created situations where preventable tragedies became almost inevitable. Rhodes's death robbed metal of one of its most promising and innovative talents, serving as a stark reminder of how substance abuse creates devastating collateral damage that extends far beyond just the primary users themselves. 3. Lemmy Kilmister. Lemmy Kilmister built his entire persona around legendary excess, consuming absolutely staggering amounts of speed, alcohol, and cigarettes daily for over 4 decades until his battered body finally surrendered to the relentless assault. His drug of choice was methamphetamine, which he consumed constantly throughout each day to maintain the superhuman energy levels needed for Motorhead's absolutely relentless touring schedule and the aggressive musical style that demanded everything from him. Lemmy claimed to have taken speed every single day since 1968, along with consuming an entire bottle of Jack Daniels daily and smoking multiple packs of cigarettes, creating a toxic combination that should have killed him decades earlier. His cramped apartment was filled with Nazi memorabilia, vintage slot machines, and various drug paraphernalia, creating a monument to rock and roll excess that became legendary among visitors. Despite repeated warnings from concerned doctors about his rapidly deteriorating health, Lemmy absolutely refused to slow down or moderate his consumption in any way, viewing the substances as essential to his identity and creative process. The deadly combination of powerful stimulants and depressants wreaked complete havoc on his cardiovascular system, leading to multiple serious heart problems and severe diabetes in his later years. His distinctive voice became increasingly gravelly and harsh as decades of abuse took their irreversible toll on his vocal cords. When Lemmy died in December 2015, just days after being diagnosed with aggressive cancer, his body was so thoroughly damaged by decades of relentless substance abuse that the disease had found an easy target. 2. Paul Gray. Paul Gray's death shocked the metal world and highlighted how prescription drug abuse had become as dangerous as traditional street drugs in claiming musicians' lives. The Slipknot bassist struggled with addiction for years, initially using alcohol and marijuana before progressing to harder substances, including heroin and prescription opioids. His addiction was largely hidden from fans and even some bandmates, as Gray maintained a relatively low public profile compared to other Slipknot members. The combination of morphine and fentanyl that killed him represented the new face of the opioid crisis, affecting musicians and society at large. Gray's addiction intensified during periods of stress, including relationship problems and the pressures of maintaining Slipknot's intense performance schedule and creative output. Multiple attempts at rehabilitation provided temporary relief, but Gray struggled with the underlying issues that drove his drug use. His death in May 2010 at age 38 was discovered in an Iowa hotel room, ending the life of a talented musician who had helped define modern extreme metal. The tragedy forced Slipknot into hiatus and highlighted how prescription drug abuse had become a silent epidemic in the music industry. 1. Pete Way. Pete Way's career was defined as much by his legendary excess as his bass playing, with drugs and alcohol repeatedly derailing what should have been a Hall of Fame musical journey. His consumption was extraordinary, even by rock standards. ISA, reportedly drinking 2 bottles of brandy daily while consuming massive quantities of cocaine and heroin. Way's addiction led to him being fired from UFO multiple times, despite being one of the band's founding members and primary songwriters. His unreliable behavior, missed performances, and drug-fueled incidents became infamous throughout the rock world. The bassist would disappear for weeks on drug binges, spending entire record advances on substances and leaving bandmates to cover for his absence. His addiction destroyed multiple marriages and relationships, as family members couldn't compete with his primary relationship with drugs and alcohol. Way's health deteriorated severely over the decades, with multiple overdoses, liver problems, and other substance-related medical issues. Despite brief periods of sobriety and musical comeback attempts, he never fully escaped addiction's grip. His death in August 2020 represented the end of a cautionary tale about how talent and creativity mean nothing when addiction takes control of an artist. What if I told you that some of metal's biggest icons were tangled in affairs that shocked even their wildest fans? These weren't just casual flings. They were explosive, secret, and often career-threatening. From forbidden romances that tore bands apart to love triangles that fueled legendary feuds, the world of heavy metal has seen it all. Some of these stories played out in the tabloids, while others were buried deep beneath the noise. Here are 25 metal icons whose scandalous affairs rocked the stage. 25. Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne's life has always been a storm of madness, music, and temptation. While he ruled the metal world with his raw voice and reckless charm, his marriage to Sharon faced more chaos than any stage ever did. His affairs became public nightmares, nearly tearing apart the couple that fans once saw as unbreakable. From drunken flings to emotional betrayals, Ozzy's wild side refused to rest. Yet through every scandal, Sharon stood beside him, rebuilding what fame and excess kept breaking. Their story remains one of rock's most painful and unforgettable love battles. 24. Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons of Kiss built his fame on fire, makeup, and mayhem, but his true addiction was women. Known for boasting about thousands of lovers, Gene lived like a rock god with no rules. Photos, confessions, and tabloid headlines followed him everywhere, painting him as metal's biggest womanizer. But behind the confidence was a man struggling to balance fame with loyalty. When his longtime partner, Shannon Tweed, nearly left for good, Gene finally faced the wreckage he created. His countless affairs became the price he paid for living the ultimate rock star fantasy. 23. Nikki Sixx. Nikki Sixx's love life was as explosive as his bass riffs. At the height of Motley Crue's chaos, he found himself in a fiery affair with another musician's girlfriend, a scandal that later inspired one of the band's biggest hits. Nights blurred into stories of betrayal, heartbreak, and creative fuel. While his bandmates fed off the madness, Nikki turned his pain into music that defined an era. The affair may have been forbidden, but it gave birth to a song that captured the danger, lust, and heartbreak of living too fast in the world of heavy metal. 22. Axl Rose. Axl Rose lived for drama both on stage and off. Behind his piercing eyes and wild energy hid a man tangled in obsession and power. His affairs were intense, filled with jealousy, anger, and shattered trust. From passionate romances to violent fights, Axl's love life mirrored the chaos of Guns N' Roses. Every affair seemed to fuel another song, another rumor, another storm. He was both the lover and the destroyer, trapped in a cycle of fame and fire. His scandals weren't just gossip. They were the living soundtrack of a man who burned everything he touched. 21. Lars Ulrich. Metallica's fiery drummer, Lars Ulrich, was no stranger to controversy. Known for his sharp temper and sharper ambition, Lars found himself juggling love, love, fame, and betrayal. At the height of Metallica's success, whispers spread about his affair that risked breaking not just hearts, but friendships too. The scandal became another test in a life already consumed by pressure and performance. Behind the drum kit, Lars kept the band's rhythm steady, but off-stage, his personal life spun out of control. His affair proved that even the strongest beat in metal can lose its rhythm when temptation strikes. 20. Vince Neil. Vince Neil lived every day like tomorrow didn't exist. The Motley Crue frontman was surrounded by women, parties, and chaos that followed him everywhere. His affairs were wild, impulsive, and often public, leaving broken hearts behind like shattered guitars. Between tragic losses, reckless behavior, and countless scandals, his personal life became a blur of guilt and glitter. Even when love tried to ground him, fame kept dragging him back into the storm. Vince's romantic past wasn't just scandalous. It was a haunting reminder of how rock star excess can destroy the very thing worth keeping. 19. Lemmy Kilmister. Lemmy from Motorhead lived by one code: freedom. He didn't hide his affairs or apologize for them. He flaunted them with charm and brutal honesty. Lemmy's lovers came from every corner of the world, drawn to his raw energy and devil-may-care attitude. But one affair in particular hit harder than the rest, leaving even him speechless. Beneath the leather, whiskey, and cigarettes was a man who loved deeply but never belonged to anyone. His affairs weren't mistakes. They were chapters in a wild, untamed life that refused to play by anyone else's rules. 18. Dave Mustaine. Dave Mustaine's life has always been tangled with rivalry, rage, and redemption. During his early years in metal, rumors swirled that he'd crossed a dangerous line, getting involved with a rival's girlfriend. It was the kind of scandal that could have sparked a backstage war. True or not, the whispers only added fuel to his reputation as one of metal's most unpredictable forces. His music grew sharper, his lyrics darker, and his fame louder. Dave's rumored affair became just another symbol of his rebellion, a man who lived on the edge and never looked back. 17. Sebastian Bach. Sebastian Bach didn't just own the stage, he owned every room he walked into. With flowing hair, wild charisma, and a voice that could shake arenas, he became one of metal's biggest heartthrobs. But fame brought temptation, and Sebastian dove right in. His backstage affairs were legendary, filled with passion, chaos, and heartbreak. Lovers came and went as fast as tour dates, and every headline only fueled his reputation as rock's charming troublemaker. Behind the spotlight, his love life became another show, loud, reckless, and unforgettable, just like the man himself. 16. James Hetfield. James Hetfield always seemed like the calm center of Metallica's storm. But even the strongest frontmen have moments of weakness. At one point, rumors spread of a hidden affair that almost shattered the band's brotherhood. The tension spilled into their music, their tours, and their friendships. While Hetfield rarely spoke about his private life, those close to him saw the cracks forming beneath the surface. The affair marked a dark chapter in his journey, one that tested his loyalty, his faith, and his control. Through it all, his music carried the weight of his silence. 15. Slash lived the ultimate rock star life: guitars, chaos, and endless temptation. His affairs became as famous as his guitar solos, each one mixing passion with destruction. Behind the sunglasses and cool grin was a man spiraling through addiction, trying to fill a void fame couldn't fix. One affair in particular became a breaking point, forcing him to face his demons and the damage he'd caused. While his music stayed flawless, his heart carried the scars of every secret romance. Slash's wild affairs became proof that even legends can lose themselves in the fire they create. 14. Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Manson turned darkness into art, but his love life blurred the line between performance and reality. His affairs were twisted tales of obsession, control, and chaos. Each relationship added fuel to the public's fascination and fear, with rumors of disturbing behavior surrounding his private world. From on-stage shock to off-stage scandals, Manson's affairs were as controversial as his image. They exposed a man torn between creativity and self-destruction. What he called love often looked like pain, and behind the gothic makeup stood a soul burning under its own fame. 13. Corey Taylor. Corey Taylor's voice could scream, whisper, and confess all at once, and his love life carried the same raw energy. During Slipknot's rise, Corey found himself caught in emotional chaos that spilled into the public eye. His affairs blurred the line between passion and heartbreak, leaving behind confusion and regret. Even when he tried to rebuild, rumors kept chasing him, feeding into the mystique that surrounded his intense personality. Corey's affairs reflected the same inner battle heard in his lyrics, a mix of pain, guilt, and an unrelenting hunger to feel alive. 12. Rob Halford. For years, Rob Halford lived a double life. As Judas Priest's powerful frontman, he roared on stage with unmatched fire. But behind the scenes, he carried a secret that could have ended his career. His hidden affairs were filled with fear, longing, and quiet heartbreak. In a world that wasn't ready to accept him, every romance felt like a risk. Rob's struggle between love and survival became one of metal's most emotional, untold stories. When he finally spoke his truth, it changed everything, not just for him, but for countless fans who saw themselves in his silence. 11. Tommy Lee. Tommy Lee wasn't just a drummer. He was the face of rock and chaos. His explosive affair with Pamela Anderson became one of the most famous scandals in entertainment history. Their passionate, unpredictable relationship played out under flashing cameras and public judgment. Every fight, every rumor, and every headline turned into global gossip. The private tape scandal made them legends of both love and controversy. While Tommy lived without regrets, the affair changed how the world saw fame, privacy, and obsession. It wasn't just a love story. It was rock history written in heartbreak. 10. Dimebag Darrell. Behind the wild riffs and crazy laughter, Dimebag Darrell carried a softer side he rarely showed. Known for his loyalty and deep emotions, he quietly held a long, secret love that fans barely knew existed. It wasn't the kind of affair splashed across headlines. It was something private, almost sacred. Yet even that hidden relationship had its storms, tested by fame, touring, and temptation. For all his wildness, Dimebag's heart beat with surprising tenderness. His secret affair revealed a man who loved fiercely, even in a world built on noise, rebellion, and endless distraction. 9. Dave Navarro. Dave Navarro lived like every day was a stage. His mix of passion, mystery, and self-destruction made his affairs as famous as his riffs. Between Jane's Addiction and the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Dave found himself lost in a blur of beauty and chaos. His relationships, often with high-profile women, burned bright and ended painfully. The more he searched for love, the more fame seemed to pull it apart. Each affair became another melody of heartbreak, feeding his art and his darkness. For Dave, romance was never peaceful. It was fire dressed as love. 8. Bret Michaels. Bret Michaels turned his charm into a brand, surrounded by women who dreamed of being his next great love. His reality show, Rock of Love, gave fans a front-row seat to his chaotic romantic life. But behind the cameras, Bret's real affairs were far more intense. His heart bounced between fame, family, and fleeting connections. Each relationship carried its own storm, often ending in public heartbreak. For all his confidence and charm, Bret's search for love seemed endless. His scandals proved that even the smoothest rock star can't escape the heartbreak he sings about. 7. Joey Jordison. Joey Jordison, Slipknot's lightning-fast drummer, carried a dark beauty both in his music and his life. Behind his mask, he lived through heartbreaks that few ever saw. One of his secret romances turned painful, leaving behind deep emotional scars. As addiction and illness entered his life, that heartbreak became part of his silent struggle. He poured all the pain into his drumming, turning grief into rhythm. Joey's affairs were never about scandal. They were about loneliness, love, and loss. His story remains one of metal's most haunting reminders of how fame can't heal every wound. 6. Phil. Anselmo Phil Anselmo's fiery spirit made him one of metal's most powerful voices and one of its most self-destructive. His affairs mirrored the chaos inside him, tangled with lies, anger, and regret. Between heavy drinking, addiction, and the pressures of fame, love often became another battlefield. His relationships cracked under the weight of his own demons. Yet through every scandal, Phil's passion never faded. It just turned darker. The same fire that fueled his music burned through his heart, leaving ashes where affection once lived. His affairs became symbols of a man forever fighting himself. 5. Glenn Danzig. Glenn Danzig built his image on darkness and mystery, keeping his private life sealed away from the public. But one affair slipped through the cracks, shocking fans who thought they knew him. The relationship revealed a softer, more human side to the Misfits frontman, a man capable of deep affection behind his cold stare. Though the romance faded, its discovery showed how even the most guarded rockers can fall for love's unpredictability. Danzig's secret affair added a rare vulnerability to his legend, proving that not even metal's darkest figure could escape the pull of desire. 4. James LaBrie. James LaBrie always carried himself with calm professionalism, rarely making headlines outside his music. But behind that quiet image, a private scandal brewed that nearly shattered his clean reputation. Rumors of an affair began to swirl, painting a very different picture of the Dream Theater frontman. Though he tried to keep it hidden, the whispers grew louder, threatening to overshadow his artistry. For a man known for discipline and control, this slip into forbidden romance shocked his loyal fans. It was a reminder that even the most composed artist can fall into temptation's trap. 3. Ronnie James Dio. Ronnie James Dio was worshipped for his voice, his integrity, and his larger-than-life presence. But behind that divine image were stories of quiet temptation. Known for his long marriage, Dio's name once surfaced in rumors of secret affairs during his touring years. Whether true or not, they added a layer of human imperfection to the metal icon. His loyalty was legendary, yet the whispers painted a picture of a man torn between passion and duty. Dio's rumored affairs became part of his myth, a reminder that even saints of metal have human hearts. 2. Mick Mars. Mick Mars lived his life fighting pain, disease, and emotional exhaustion. But even through it all, love found a way to complicate things. His secret affair during the height of Motley Crue's chaos tested his loyalty and self-control. Between physical struggles and the madness of fame, Mick's heart drifted into forbidden territory. The affair brought guilt, tension, and heartbreak that lingered for years. Beneath his quiet demeanor, he carried the weight of choices made in weakness. Mick's story showed that even the most disciplined man can lose balance when emotions become louder than reason. 1. Kirk Hammett. Kirk Hammett was always Metallica's calm, thoughtful guitarist, the peaceful balance to the band's wild energy. But fame has a way of testing everyone, and Kirk wasn't immune. His affair became one of the most shocking scandals to hit his personal life, threatening to destroy his marriage and peace of mind. The betrayal, though private, spilled into his emotional world, leaving behind guilt and strain. Through reflection and time, Kirk managed to rebuild what was almost lost. His story stands as a quiet warning that even the most grounded rock star can stumble when temptation strikes hardest. So after hearing all these wild love stories, one thing's clear: rock and romance have never mixed quietly. Behind every killer riff and sold-out tour, there's drama, passion, and chaos that could rival any movie plot. But which of these scandals shocked you the most? Were they acts of love gone wrong, or just part of the wild metal lifestyle? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us which affair blew your mind. And if you want more untold stories from the darker, wilder side of heavy metal, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the next story might just top them all. 20. Sebastian Bach. Sebastian Bach exploded onto the scene with Skid Row, bringing unmatched energy, long hair, and a voice that could shake arenas. But behind that incredible talent was a temper that burned bridges faster than fame could build them. He cursed at fans, fought with his bandmates, and never hesitated to speak his mind, no matter how rude it sounded. Reporters called him arrogant, and fellow musicians avoided his drama. Bach didn't care. He lived for chaos, spotlight, and confrontation. Even years later, his interviews and social media posts showed the same ego and attitude that made him both magnetic and unbearable. He wasn't just loud on stage, he was loud everywhere he went. 19. Rob Halford. Rob Halford of Judas Priest became one of metal's greatest frontmen, commanding the stage with power and control. But behind his legendary performances, many saw a man too proud to bend. His confidence often crossed into arrogance, especially when he dismissed critics or belittled newer metal acts. Fans worshipped his voice, yet some insiders claimed he treated others as beneath him. Halford's perfectionism and dominance in the band created tension, but he never seemed to care. He knew his worth and demanded everyone else know it too. Though he helped define heavy metal itself, his cold demeanor and superiority left some believing the metal god title went straight to his head. 18. Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne might be one of heavy metal's most iconic figures, but his offstage behavior often turned admiration into frustration. Known for his wild, drug-fueled antics, Ozzy's unpredictable nature made life around him chaotic. He bit the head off a bat on stage, trashed hotel rooms, and constantly pushed his band and managers to their limits. His careless attitude during performances sometimes left fans wondering whether they'd see brilliance or disaster. While his talent and charm made him a legend, his reckless lifestyle nearly destroyed everything he built. To some, Ozzy was a rock god. To others, he was a walking disaster who mistook madness for magic. 17. Joey Jordison. Joey Jordison was the heartbeat of Slipknot, a drumming powerhouse who gave the band its signature aggression, but behind his mask and lightning-fast rhythm, he carried a storm of personal battles and ego clashes. Bandmates often described him as brilliant yet impossible to deal with. His temper and perfectionism caused rifts during recording sessions and tours. When Slipknot suddenly announced his departure, fans were left divided. Some blamed the band, others blamed his attitude. Though Joey's skill made him unforgettable, his difficult personality left lasting tension in the group. His tragic death years later reminded everyone that behind the anger and talent was a man struggling more than anyone knew. 16. Dave Lombardo. Dave Lombardo's drumming gave Slayer its unrelenting power, but his relationship with the band was filled with fights, money disputes, and ego battles. Known for speaking his mind, Lombardo didn't hold back when he felt disrespected or underpaid. His blunt honesty and fiery temper earned him respect from fans but frustration from his bandmates. He walked away from Slayer multiple times, each exit surrounded by controversy. While his skill on the drums was unmatched, his demanding attitude and constant conflicts made collaboration nearly impossible. Many admired his integrity but couldn't deny his stubbornness. Lombardo proved that even musical genius can be buried under pride and confrontation. 15. Ted Nent. Ted Nent built his name as a showman with sharp riffs and sharper words. On stage, he loved to provoke, using insults and offensive jokes that often crossed the line. His interviews were filled with harsh comments about fellow artists and fans, leaving a trail of bitterness behind. Instead of apologizing, he doubled down, claiming honesty as an excuse for cruelty. Many saw him as the embodiment of arrogance, a man who thrived on attention no matter how negative it was. His performances were electric, but his personality often outshone the music itself. Ted Nent became infamous not for what he played, but for how easily he turned admiration into anger. 14. Vince Neil. Vince Neil lived every rock star cliché to the fullest and paid the price for it. As Motley Crue's frontman, he had the looks, voice, and attitude that made fans scream. But behind the fame came a long trail of trouble: bar fights, arrests, and tragedy. His reckless drunk driving accident that took a friend's life left a permanent stain on his reputation. Even after that, Vince continued his wild partying, clashing with bandmates and stumbling through live shows. His arrogance and self-destruction became almost as famous as his voice. Many saw him not as a rock hero, but as a man who let ego and chaos burn everything he touched. 13. Yngwie Malmsteen. Yngwie Malmsteen's guitar skills are almost untouchable, but his attitude made him one of rock's hardest people to work with. Known for his explosive temper, he once screamed at a flight attendant, shouting his now infamous line, "You've unleashed the fury." That moment captured his reputation perfectly, a genius who thought the world revolved around him. Bandmates often quit due to his controlling personality, and interviews revealed a man who rarely gave credit to anyone but himself. His talent is legendary, yet so is his ego. To many in the industry, Yngwie isn't just a guitar god. He's a reminder that brilliance without humility often turns into pure arrogance. 12. Mike Patton. Mike Patton's voice could shift from whispers to monstrous screams in seconds, making him one of the most creative frontmen in heavy metal. But with that genius came an attitude that often rubbed people the wrong way. He was known for mocking other artists, spitting on stages, and pulling shocking stunts during shows. Fans loved his unpredictability, but musicians often called him arrogant and disrespectful. Patton's sarcasm and refusal to play by the rules made him both fascinating and frustrating. He didn't just break boundaries, he broke patience too. While his talent made him unforgettable, his sharp tongue and constant defiance earned him a permanent spot among metal's most divisive figures. 11. Glenn Frey. Glenn Frey, best known for his work with the Eagles, had the charm of a rock icon, but the temper of a tyrant. Behind the band's smooth harmonies, Frey ruled with an iron fist, often clashing with Don Felder and others over creative control. He demanded perfection and expected everyone to follow his lead without question. Many insiders described him as manipulative and hard to please, creating endless tension in the studio and on tour. Though his talent was undeniable, his controlling nature turned friendships into feuds. Glenn Frey may have helped craft timeless hits, but his relentless need for dominance made working with him nearly impossible. 10. Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons turned rock stardom into a business empire, but his arrogance made him one of the most hated figures in heavy metal. Known for bragging about his wealth, women, and influence, he often came across as greedy and disrespectful. Bandmates accused him of caring more about money than music, while fans grew tired of his constant self-promotion. He loved controversy and never hesitated to insult anyone who disagreed with him. Even so, Simmons knew exactly how to keep his name in the headlines. Whether admired or despised, he mastered the art of being talked about. For many, Gene wasn't just part of Kiss. He was the reason some stopped listening. 9. Euronymous. Euronymous, the guitarist of Mayhem, became infamous not just for his music, but for his obsession with death and violence. He built the early black metal scene in Norway, promoting extreme ideals that blurred the line between art and insanity. Cold and confrontational, he glorified darkness and chaos, often pushing others toward dangerous acts. His relationship with fellow musician Varg Vikernes turned deadly, ending in his shocking murder. Even before his death, Euronymous was seen as a twisted provocateur who thrived on fear and control. His name still divides metal fans. Some call him a visionary, others a villain who turned heavy. Metal's rebellion into something far darker. 8. Varg Vikernes. Varg Vikernes, the man behind Burzum, isn't just hated. He's one of the most infamous names in all of metal. In the early 90s, he was part of Norway's dark black metal scene, obsessed with violence, fire, and chaos. Varg became known for burning churches and eventually murdering his bandmate, Euronymous. His shocking crime stunned the world and turned him into a symbol of metal's most dangerous side. Even after serving time, his hateful views and extremist beliefs kept him in the headlines. While his early music influenced generations, his actions made him one of the most despised figures to ever step into the world of heavy metal. 7. Courtney Love. Courtney Love never cared about being liked, and that attitude made her one of rock's most controversial figures. Known for her band Hole and her stormy marriage to Kurt Cobain, she built a reputation for drama, feuds, and reckless behavior. Love often attacked fellow artists publicly, threw tantrums on stage, and sparked countless rumors wherever she went. Many saw her as talented but toxic, with every headline tied to scandal. Even in interviews, she seemed to enjoy confrontation, feeding off the chaos she created. Courtney didn't just live the rock and roll life, she made it explode around her, leaving behind a legacy of talent tangled in trouble. 6. Fred Durst. Fred Durst became the face of Limp Bizkit's late 90s success, mixing rap and metal into an angry, energetic sound. But behind the music was an ego that seemed unstoppable. Known for his cocky attitude and constant feuds, Durst turned concerts into battlegrounds. At Woodstock '99, his reckless behavior fueled riots and chaos, making him one of the most hated figures in rock. Critics mocked his lyrics, fans booed his arrogance, and fellow musicians called him a joke. Yet Durst never backed down. He embraced the hate, turning it into his brand. To many, he wasn't just the voice of nu metal, he was its biggest embarrassment. 5. Gary Glitter. Gary Glitter went from glam rock fame to global disgrace. Once adored for his flashy performances and catchy anthems, he later became one of the most hated musicians in history. His downfall came when horrifying crimes against children surfaced, shattering his image forever. The world watched in disgust as he was convicted and imprisoned, erasing any trace of his once bright career. Even radio stations banned his music and fans destroyed his records. Glitter's story isn't just about fame gone wrong, it's about evil hiding in plain sight. His name became a warning that sometimes the real monsters aren't just on stage, they're behind the spotlight. 4. Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent's guitar may have roared with passion, but his mouth roared louder. Over the years, his political rants, crude humor, and offensive remarks turned fans into critics. He built his reputation not only as a musician, but as one of rock's most outspoken and divisive figures. Known for targeting anyone who disagreed with him, Ted thrived on controversy and confrontation. His interviews often spiraled into angry tirades that overshadowed his music completely. Despite his success, his ego and attitude left a sour taste in the metal community. For many, Nugent became less of a rock star and more of a reminder of how arrogance can drown out talent. 3. Dave Mustaine. Dave Mustaine's story is one of both brilliance and bitterness. After being kicked out of Metallica, his anger fueled the creation of Megadeth, one of metal's greatest bands. But with success came ego. He developed a reputation for controlling everything, from bandmates to sound production. His cutting remarks about rivals and ex-friends made him one of the most disliked figures in heavy metal. Though his talent is undeniable, his temper and pride often poison relationships around him. Over the years, Dave tried to soften his image, but his legacy of grudges and arrogance followed wherever he went. He built an empire, but it came with heavy emotional wreckage. 2. Ritchie Blackmore. Ritchie Blackmore's genius shaped the sound of Deep Purple and Rainbow, but working with him was a nightmare. he demanded perfection from everyone, often firing bandmates without warning. Cold, moody, and unpredictable, he made rehearsals feel like psychological battles. His ego was as sharp as his riffs, and he didn't hesitate to walk off stage mid-show if things weren't perfect. While fans adored his skill, musicians feared his attitude. Many called him brilliant but unbearable, a man who valued control more than friendship. Ritchie's music broke boundaries, but his ruthless behavior made him one of rock's most respected, yet most hated personalities. 1. Axl Rose. Axl Rose defined chaos in heavy metal. As the frontman of Guns N' Roses, he had the voice of an angel and the temper of a storm. He insulted fans, showed up hours late to concerts, and started fights on stage without hesitation. His racism, arrogance, and constant clashes with everyone around him made him infamous. Bandmates feared his mood swings, while fans never knew if they'd get a show or a disaster. Despite his musical brilliance, Axl's cruel outbursts and self-destructive behavior left scars across the industry. He didn't just earn fame, he earned hatred, becoming the symbol of how ego can destroy even the greatest talent. So, there you have it. 20 heavy metal figures who proved that fame and fury often go hand in hand. Some say their bad behavior made them legends, while others believe it destroyed everything they built. But what do you think? Were these stars simply misunderstood, or did they truly earn their place among the most hated in metal history? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more untold stories from the wild side of rock and metal.
Dave Lombardo is known for his fast and aggressive playing style, particularly for his mastery of the double bass drum technique, which earned him the nickname Father of Double Bass. His work has influenced countless drummers in the world of rock and heavy metal. Although he has gone in and out of major bands such as Slayer, his contributions remain irreplaceable, and many bands continue to seek his expertise. His exploration of solo projects and cross-genre collaborations has only strengthened his status as a true legend in the metal world. Born in Havana, Cuba, on February 16, 1965, Dave Lombardo left his homeland at around 15 months old. His family's departure from Cuba was driven by the unstable political situation and concerns about their children's future amid the turmoil of the revolution. Prior to their departure, Lombardo's two older brothers had been sent to the United States through a Catholic Church humanitarian program called Operación Pedro Pan. More than 5 decades later, in January 2018, Lombardo returned to Cuba in an emotional visit. Accompanied by his mother and fiancée, he retraced the almost forgotten past of his childhood, visiting his old house, his father's long-closed butcher shop, and reconnecting with his birthplace, which he had only known through family stories. Dave Lombardo's interest in music developed at an early age. At the age of 8, he gave his first performance, playing Santana's Everybody's Everything on the bongo drums, which sparked his musical curiosity. Seeing his son's talent, Lombardo's father bought him a Pearl Maxwin drum set when he was 10 years old, an instrument that became central to his musical exploration. He taught himself to play by mimicking songs from Kiss's Alive album, particularly 100,000 Years, eventually mastering the drum solo. Although he took drum lessons briefly, Lombardo was more drawn to a freer and more challenging way of learning, preferring a path of self-exploration. His interest in various genres like funk, Latin, and soul even led him to work as a mobile DJ under the name A Touch of Class, before he refocused on rock music in the late 1970s. After graduating from private middle school, he attended Pius X High School. His performance of Johnny B. Good at a school talent show earned him the nickname David the Drummer among his peers. Not long after, he formed a band called Escape, which later changed its name to Sabotage. However, his parents noticed that Dave was starting to neglect school and asked him to leave the band and concentrate on finishing high school. His mother insisted that he graduate, and Lombardo honored her request, eventually graduating from Southgate High School in June 1983. The pivotal moment in Dave Lombardo's career came when he was 16 years old. Friends told him about a guitarist named Kerry King who lived not far from his house. Lombardo introduced himself as a drummer and expressed his desire to form a band. After several jam sessions in Lombardo's garage, King introduced him to Jeff Hanneman, Having previously played in a band called Quits with Tom Araya, King eventually introduced Araya to Lombardo and Hahnemann as well. In their early days, Slayer recorded their debut album, Show No Mercy, independently and began building a reputation in the underground scene. However, the major turning point came when Lombardo recommended producer Rick Rubin for their third album, Rain in Blood, Slayer's best-selling album, which is considered one of the heaviest albums of all time. However, during the promotional tour for that album, Lombardo decided to leave the band due to insufficient earnings. He had expected fair compensation, especially after Slayer signed with a major label. His position was temporarily filled by Tony Scaglione from the band Whiplash. Unsatisfied with the result, Rick Rubin persistently persuaded Lombardo to return. After initially refusing, Lombardo eventually rejoined in 1987 and recorded drums for the albums South of Heaven and Seasons in the Abyss. In 1992, Dave Lombardo left Slayer again for personal reasons. He wanted to be present for the birth of his first child and informed the band that he couldn't join the tour during the last 2 weeks of September. However, the band's manager still scheduled Slayer to perform at a festival during that time. Despite pressure, Lombardo stood firm in his decision. After 10 years apart from Slayer, Dave Lombardo was contacted by the band again in 2001 to play in several shows. Jeff Hanneman strongly wanted Lombardo back, while Kerry King was initially unenthusiastic, believing Lombardo's playing had not lived up to expectations. However, King changed his mind drastically after seeing Lombardo's performance during rehearsals and acknowledged the solid and precise power of his drumming. Lombardo officially returned as Slayer's drummer, with his first performance taking place on January 24, 2002, at Toad's Place in New Haven, Connecticut. He also contributed to the albums Christ Illusion and World Painted Blood, which marked the return of Slayer's signature energy in the eyes of fans and critics. His contribution was seen as a key factor in the band's renewed popularity, with reviews highlighting the strength and style of his drumming. However, in February 2013, Lombardo left Slayer once again due to contract and payment disputes. He revealed that only about 10% of the tour's revenue went to the band members, while the remaining 90% was claimed as production, management, and other costs. Lombardo and Tom Araya even hired an auditor to investigate the discrepancies, but Lombardo was never given access to the financial data he requested. He also refused to sign a new contract that did not guarantee commissions in writing, limited his right to media transparency, and offered no access to audits. When Lombardo proposed renegotiations and a new business model to protect the band members' rights, Kerry King rejected the proposal, stating that if Lombardo did not agree, they would find a replacement drummer. Less than a week later, Lombardo received an email from Slayer's lawyer stating that his position had been filled for the upcoming tour by drummer John Deddy. Lombardo stated that he could no longer work under a system he believed was non-transparent and unfair, choosing instead to leave in order to maintain his professional integrity. He also opted not to attend Slayer's final concert on November 30, 2019, due to his commitments to personal musical projects. Outside of Slayer, Dave Lombardo has pursued a diverse musical career. He formed Grip Inc., a groove metal band that released several albums between 1995 and 2004. He also joined Fantomas, an experimental supergroup with Mike Patton, and contributed to Testament's album The Gathering. In the early 2010s, Lombardo started a project called Film, blending elements of metal, jazz, and experimental music. He also played as the drummer for Suicidal Tendencies, performing on albums and tours throughout the mid-2000s. In addition, Lombardo was involved in other projects such as Dead Cross, Misfits, Mr. Bungle, and Empire State Bastard, showcasing his flexibility across various musical styles. In 2023, he released his first solo album, Rites of Percussion, featuring instrumental drum compositions influenced by music from around the world. Dave Lombardo also formed a music project with his wife, Paula Lombardo, called Venemuras, where Dave serves as producer and drummer, while Paula writes the lyrics and performs as the lead vocalist. Paula, who was previously known as a backup singer for Wayne Newton, initially bonded with Lombardo without knowing he was the famous drummer from Slayer. In an interview with Radio X, Paula shared that the first time she saw Dave perform on stage, she simply thought of him as an interesting drummer. The couple got married on February 25, 2018, in a ceremony held at Greens Point Lighthouse in Latete, New Brunswick, Canada, after dating for about 6 years. Lombardo has also showcased his creative side behind the scenes of the film and television industry. He has contributed to the production of musical scores for several notable works. In 2004, Lombardo collaborated with composer Tyler Bates on the project Dawn of the Dead, an experience he described as truly incredible and one that opened the door for him into the world of film music. He later demonstrated his skills again in the film Insidious Chapter 3, this time working with Joseph Bashara to create more ambient and atmospheric drum compositions, very different from the aggressive drumming style he's usually known for. In addition to his work in music, Lombardo has expressed his creativity through visual art. In early 2014, he launched his first art project titled Rhythm Mysterium in collaboration with the Scene 4 art team in Los Angeles. The collection consists of 13 unique pieces where Lombardo painted with his drumming rhythms using visual technology that captures the motion and light of his performance, then transforms it onto canvas. Dave Lombardo is known for his fast and aggressive playing style, particularly for his mastery of the double bass drum technique, which earned him the nickname Father of Double Bass. His work has influenced countless drummers in the world of rock and heavy metal. Although he has gone in and out of major bands such as Slayer, his contributions remain irreplaceable, and many bands continue to seek his expertise. His exploration of solo projects and cross-genre collaborations has only strengthened his status as a true legend in the metal world. Born in Havana, Cuba, on February 16, 1965, Dave Lombardo left his homeland at around 15 months old. His family's departure from Cuba was driven by the unstable political situation and concerns about their children's future amid the turmoil of the revolution. Prior to their departure, Lombardo's two older brothers had been sent to the United States through a Catholic Church humanitarian program called Operación Pedro Pan. More than 5 decades later, in January 2018, Lombardo returned to Cuba in an emotional visit. Accompanied by his mother and fiancée, he retraced the almost forgotten past of his childhood, visiting his old house, his father's long-closed butcher shop, and reconnecting with his birthplace, which he had only known through family stories. Dave Lombardo's interest in music developed at an early age. At the age of 8, he gave his first performance, playing Santana's Everybody's Everything on the bongo drums, which sparked his musical curiosity. Seeing his son's talent, Lombardo's father bought him a Pearl Maxwin drum set when he was 10 years old, an instrument that became central to his musical exploration. He taught himself to play by mimicking songs from Kiss's Alive album, particularly 100,000 Years, eventually mastering the drum solo. Although he took drum lessons briefly, Lombardo was more drawn to a freer and more challenging way of learning, preferring a path of self-exploration. His interest in various genres like funk, Latin, and soul even led him to work as a mobile DJ under the name A Touch of Class, before he refocused on rock music in the late 1970s. After graduating from private middle school, he attended Pius X High School. His performance of Johnny B. Good at a school talent show earned him the nickname David the Drummer among his peers. Not long after, he formed a band called Escape, which later changed its name to Sabotage. However, his parents noticed that Dave was starting to neglect school and asked him to leave the band and concentrate on finishing high school. His mother insisted that he graduate, and Lombardo honored her request, eventually graduating from Southgate High School in June 1983. The pivotal moment in Dave Lombardo's career came when he was 16 years old. Friends told him about a guitarist named Kerry King who lived not far from his house. Lombardo introduced himself as a drummer and expressed his desire to form a band. After several jam sessions in Lombardo's garage, King introduced him to Jeff Hanneman. Having previously played in a band called Quits with Tom Araya, King eventually introduced Araya to Lombardo and Hanneman as well. In their early days, Slayer recorded their debut album, Show No Mercy, independently and began building a reputation in the underground scene. However, the major turning point came when Lombardo recommended producer Rick Rubin for their third album, Rain in Blood, Slayer's best-selling album, which is considered one of the heaviest albums of all time. However, during the promotional tour for that album, Lombardo decided to leave the band due to insufficient earnings. He had expected fair compensation, especially after Slayer signed with a major label. His position was temporarily filled by Tony Scaglione from the band Whiplash. Unsatisfied with the result, Rick Rubin persistently persuaded Lombardo to return. After initially refusing, Lombardo eventually rejoined in 1987 and recorded drums for the albums South of Heaven and Seasons in the Abyss. In 1992, Dave Lombardo left Slayer again for personal reasons. He wanted to be present for the birth of his first child and informed the band that he couldn't join the tour during the last 2 weeks of September. However, the band's manager still scheduled Slayer to perform at a festival during that time. Despite pressure, Lombardo stood firm in his decision. After 10 years apart from Slayer, Dave Lombardo was contacted by the band again in 2001 to play in several shows. Jeff Hanneman strongly wanted Lombardo back, while Kerry King was initially unenthusiastic, believing Lombardo's playing had not lived up to expectations. However, King changed his mind drastically after seeing Lombardo's performance during rehearsals and acknowledged the solid and precise power of his drumming. Lombardo officially returned as Slayer's drummer, with his first performance taking place on January 24, 2002, at Toad's Place in New Haven, Connecticut. He also contributed to the albums Christ Illusion and World Painted Blood, which marked the return of Slayer's signature energy in the eyes of fans and critics. His contribution was seen as a key factor in the band's renewed popularity, with reviews highlighting the strength and style of his drumming. However, in February 2013, Lombardo left Slayer once again due to contract and payment disputes. He revealed that only about 10% of the tour's revenue went to the band members, while the remaining 90% was claimed as production, management, and other costs. Lombardo and Tom Araya even hired an auditor to investigate the discrepancies, but Lombardo was never given access to the financial data he requested. He also refused to sign a new contract that did not guarantee commissions in writing, limited his right to media transparency, and offered no access to audits. When Lombardo proposed renegotiations and a new business model to protect the band members' rights, Kerry King rejected the proposal, stating that if Lombardo did not agree, they would find a replacement drummer. Less than a week later, Lombardo received an email from Slayer's lawyer stating that his position had been filled for the upcoming tour by drummer John Deddy. Lombardo stated that he could no longer work under a system he believed was non-transparent and unfair, choosing instead to leave in order to maintain his professional integrity. He also opted not to attend Slayer's final concert on November 30th, 2019, due to his commitments to personal musical projects. Outside of Slayer, Dave Lombardo has pursued a diverse musical career. He formed Grip Inc., a groove metal band that released several albums between 1995 and 2004. He also joined Fantomas, an experimental supergroup with Mike Patton, and contributed to Testament's album The Gathering. In the early 2010s, Lombardo started a project called Film, blending elements of metal, jazz, and experimental music. He also played as the drummer for Suicidal Tendencies, performing on albums and tours throughout the mid-2000s. In addition, Lombardo was involved in other projects such as Dead Cross, Misfits, Mr. Bungle, and Empire State Bastard, showcasing his flexibility across various musical styles. In 2023, he released his first solo album, Rites of Percussion, featuring instrumental drum compositions influenced by music from around the world. Dave Lombardo also formed a music project with his wife, Paula Lombardo, called Venemuras, where Dave serves as producer and drummer, while Paula writes the lyrics and performs as the lead vocalist. Paula, who was previously known as a backup singer for Wayne Newton, initially bonded with Lombardo without knowing he was the famous drummer from Slayer. In an interview with Radio X, Paula shared that the first time she saw Dave perform on stage, she simply thought of him as an interesting drummer. The couple got married on February 25, 2018, in a ceremony held at Greens Point Lighthouse in Letite, New Brunswick, Canada, after dating for about 6 years. Lombardo has also showcased his creative side behind the scenes of the film and television industry. He has contributed to the production of musical scores for several notable works. In 2004, Lombardo collaborated with composer Tyler Bates on the project Dawn of the Dead, an experience he described as truly incredible and one that opened the door for him into the world of film music. He later demonstrated his skills again in the film Insidious Chapter 3, this time working with Joseph Bishara to create more ambient and atmospheric drum compositions, very different from the aggressive drumming style he's usually known for. In addition to his work in music, Lombardo has expressed his creativity through visual art. In early 2014, He launched his first art project titled Rhythm Mysterium in collaboration with the Scene 4 art team in Los Angeles. The collection consists of 13 unique pieces where Lombardo painted with his drumming rhythms using visual technology that captures the motion and light of his performance, then transforms it onto canvas.